Hi, this is Tina Schweiger. I am the Martechify host for your show today. I have with me Amy Schroyer. So excited to have her. First, I'll tell you a little bit about Martechify. We are a community of marketing professionals sharing our ideas, our best practices, and our success stories and challenges just to help everyone stay current in this dynamic and quickly changing landscape of marketing technology. So I'd love to introduce Amy. I could call you Dr. Amy Schroyer. She is here with me today. And could you give us a little bit of background on, who you are, how you arrived where you are today, and maybe some of your companies and industries you've worked with?
Thank you for having me, Tina. This is really exciting for me, and I'm a little nervous, but I'm going to power through. I would say that my experience in marketing, my experience becoming a marketing executive, is not necessarily typical. Although I think in today's world, we all have kind of interesting and somewhat surprising journeys. But I began my career actually as a market research analyst at a bank, a super regional called KeyBank, and I was a single contributor. My job was to help the bank understand markets and targets, potential customers for a commercial enterprise where they were trying to sell ACH payment technology that is used in intrabank transfer to consumers and businesses who were trying to sell online. So my job was to understand the market, understand the business, understand competitors. That business went away within maybe a year or two of me being at the bank, and it sort of turned out to be great. I then got the opportunity to move into research project and go to market planning for global treasury management, short-term money management for businesses. And then I moved into a role working for the chief administrative officer, where my job was to um, take to create market research and analysis and take those insights to help our sellers, our bankers, win in the market. That was an interesting it was an interesting approach at the time. I started doing that in the commercial and investment bank. There weren't a lot of folks who were going to market in that way. We started as a request-based service center and ended up being a revenue generating external consultancy for the company. So that was great. So I had a little bit of success there, and it was especially awesome because I approached the vice chair and said, listen, I think we need to have this service, and I think it'll help our bankers sell, and I think it'll be really good in the market, and it'll help us differentiate us. My focus was research and analysis, and I was marketing the idea of that service without ever really thinking I was doing marketing. Like, to me, I was just doing, research and competitive intelligence and strategy. So I built that department, and I had a really good, I had the good fortune of working for wonderful people at that bank for many years, and they helped me grow and develop and skills and departments that sort of took the notion of strategy and market research and stretched it beyond what I knew how to do. So I ended up I maintained the market research and competitive intelligence service. I added enterprise knowledge management, project management, corporate and divisional strategy. I always forget some of these. I apologize. Corporate and divisional strategy, client experience for the commercial and investment bank, and then this is sort of an obscure one, but I ended up doing the writing for the vice chair for his earnings releases and presentations and stuff. And the beauty of that experience over time was that I never had to stop doing a thing to do a new thing. So it was this experience of having sort of portfolio expansion. In some ways, it seemed kind of straightforward and obvious. Of course, Amy can take on that because she can take on B because she does A. But in other ways, it really wasn't that obvious, or at least it wasn't stuff that I had thought about for myself. So I credit KeyBank and I credit the leadership there with helping me understand a lot about my potential, sort of helping me expand what I thought I could do, how I could add value. And it was early in my career, so it was a very formative experience. Um, I took some time off and I taught and I did a little bit of consulting when my kids were young. Then I went back to work, and my first job was to build a global market research center again for Lubrizol, which is a specialty chemical manufacturer, and that was kind of cool. It was a nice first job back because I knew how to do it. So my portfolio at Key ended up, I had maybe 7 or 8 services and departments. And when I started at Lubrizol, I was building one. So it was nice. It was a nice way to ease back into the world. Manufacturing was really new to me. Chemical manufacturing was really new to me. Working internationally was new to me. So it was a great experience because I got to add to this skill set, right? I had already had this experience at Key where I got to add awesome stuff I hadn't even imagined. Then I went to Lubrizol and I built some more skill really around how to collaborate and how to work with people in different cultures in different parts of the world in different time zones. And how to build something, how to build a marketing-based service or a market research-based service that would be valuable to as many people as possible around the world without being redundant or cost inefficient. So that was kind of great. I enjoyed that experience. I then was recruited back to banking. There had been folks that I'd worked with at Key who had moved to another super regional bank called Huntington. They wanted me to build a similar service, this time under the auspices of sales enablement to help their corporate and investment bankers win in the market. I did that. It was pretty successful. Uh, then I expanded that approach, which had been based on a sales organization, to our marketing strategy. And this was another moment where, I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if anybody would find value in this. I was just working with the commercial and investment bank, so I wasn't doing stuff for retail or consumer, anything like that. But I just thought, we're having so much success with this particular messaging strategy that when in the context of the sales pipeline, that it seems like we could expand this to a sort of one-to-many or one-to-all messaging approach, which is marketing, and I think it would be successful. So I worked for people who were awesome there, and they said, let's give it a try. And it worked. It was pretty successful. And then the CEO of that bank, Huntington, asked me to come into marketing and build a similar messaging strategy and experience for all parts of the bank. So business banking, private banking, consumer, corporate and investment. And that was the first time I actually had a job in marketing, in a marketing department. So that was my first real marketing job. And I'd already, been working for a lot of years. So I did that at Huntington. I was recruited back to Lubrizol. And this time I worked for a group of businesses that were involved in healthcare. So Lubrizol's polymers were used to make medical devices and also as an ingredient in medicine. And I went into an area of the business where there were 5 separate organizations that had been bought through acquisition. They were all manufacturers, they all operated independently, and they were all around the world. So my job was bring them together from a brand and a marketing and a messaging strategy. So that was really, in the arc of my career, that was the first time that I was responsible for every aspect of marketing, right? Not just research and strategy, but campaigns, operations, output. I had this really interesting kind of experience of, I went into that role and there were marketing folks related to each of these businesses. Some had more people, some had less. They were all over the world. Some people kind of, the marketing was their side gig, but they actually were like a product scientist. Some of the organizations were much more sophisticated, but being able to bring together the brand in a diverse international market landscape, that's challenging. And bringing together the diversity of people involved in marketing, what their skill sets are, what they're interested in, what they've done in the past, that was a whole nother learning experience for me. It was a great experience because in many cases, there would be somebody who was great at marketing, right? They loved it, or they were really good at it, but they didn't have enough time to do all the marketing stuff that I wanted to do. And then in other cases, there would be people that were 100% devoted to marketing, but they hadn't had sort of yet appropriate experiences or educational experiences or work experience to be where I needed them to be. So I would say that is the first time that I did a both a rebrand, but a pretty large scale marketing reorg. And it was, that's hard work. That's kind of tough stuff to do when you're dealing with, as I've said before, many time zones, different cultures, people who have a lot of competing priorities, a limited budget. So I had some headcount, some stuff I could do here in the US, but I had to be really mindful of how we were using these resources, money and time and people. Um, and then I sort of, I'd kind of gotten a little burned out on really large, slower moving organizations. And so I decided to take a risk and go to a hypergrowth startup called Q4 Inc. That is a Canadian company, and they make AI-based software for folks who are investor relations professionals. So think of it as sort of hyped up CRM for IR folks who are selling their organization to get investment and interest and good ratings and all that. Um, that was it was in finance, so I knew the landscape. I'd been involved in sort of investor relation adjacent stuff at the banks, and it was nice to have some sort of basic, I guess, industry grounding. But the company was very different from any place I'd ever been. It was so fast moving. There were under 100 people. I worked with Canadians for the most part, and Canadians are wonderful, but there are differences with Canadians and Americans. And I lived in Canada for 10 years, so I love the Canadians. Um, that was the company was growing, 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 growing. And I went to build a content and social media marketing program working for the CMO. And because that company had a limited runway in terms of funding, over the course of my time there, we lost a lot of folks all over the business, but in particular in marketing. So I ended up with a much larger portfolio of marketing responsibility and remaining employees. So I ended up with the website and AI and, I did some other stuff just because it was all hands on deck for a long time. And ultimately, that company did not succeed on its own. It was sold to PE, and that's when my time there ended. And it was it's that was a great experience. Again, as long as I can learn something new while I'm contributing some pretty tangible value, I really like it. I really like change and stimulation. And then I was recruited to rebuild a marketing organization at a company called Roundstone Insurance, which is a broker or provider of employee benefits or healthcare insurance to small and mid-sized businesses based on a kind of unusual funding model called captive. So I went into that organization, and I think I might have said this to Tina already, but my job really was to sort of take what they had, the department they had, sort of deconstruct it down to just the bare bones, right, in the foundation, and rebuild it in terms of operations, people, skill sets, strategy, output, data and metrics, KPIs, collaboration with other parts of the business. And that is what I did. And I had been toying with this for a few years now, but what I'm doing now is taking some of that transformation skill, that combination of what should the strategy be from a marketing perspective, and then how do we actualize it? How do we make that operational in terms of people, process, and data and systems? And I'm doing short-term gigs. So for me, short-term is 1 or 2 years at a company where I help them set up, and then I walk away and I come see them every 6 months. So that's where I am. Like I said, I don't know that it's the typical way into marketing or the CMO world, but it's my story.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely not the first person that I've talked to that ended up in marketing kind of in a roundabout way. I really love your academic background. I think your market research approach and the academic approach is a unique way of coming into marketing. And I can imagine that it really influences how you think about data when it comes to the data that the marketing organization needs to use in order to
Yeah.
function well within this quickly changing
Yeah.
technical landscape we have. Do you have any stories or experiences that highlight maybe how you view data as it relates to our marketing efforts and the technology stack that you're putting in place?
Yeah, thanks for asking. First of all, I will say thanks even for asking me about my educational background. It is varied. I loved school. I always say to people, if I could be paid to be a full-time student still today, I would do it. I love it. But I went to school in Canada. That's why I was there for so many years. I got a BA in English and German literature, not at all relevant to my current world or profession. I got an MA in sociocultural theory, fascinating, but again, not that relevant. I finished all but a dissertation of a PhD in American popular culture. And finally, I have a master's degree in library and information science, which is really where I started my focus on corporate research and strategy. Um, and I think I'm a very data-driven marketer compared to some. You know, somebody said this to me once, and I believe it. I actually think that there's no reason in today's world in 2025 to to not know the efficacy of any marketing effort. So I think that those the notion, the reality that a lot of times we would kind of market by feel, like, or our gut. This feels really successful. Somebody told me they came to this event and they loved it. So it must be great. It must be getting us whatever we need. I think those days are over. I actually think that it's become kind of less exciting and sexy in that way, but more precise because of the availability of data. So when I started this last gig at Roundstone, one of the first things I wanted to do was understand not just what the company was doing in terms of marketing today, but which of those things were successful, right? Which was working. And so I said, all right, well, let me see the data on, you know, to me, marketing kind of has four basic functions, and one is a brand awareness, which is essentially measured by engagement tools to me, or engagement activities. Lead generation, measured by volume of leads and quality of leads. Um, Sales pipeline efficacy, or speed, or success rate, measured by revenue and customer generation. And then nurturing, right, again, kind of measured by engagement metrics. So I sort of said, okay, well, let's understand what, in those four categories, what are the things we're doing today, and let's look at the data and see which ones are working, which ones aren't, so that you get to a place where you go heavy on some things, you kind of transform or change other things that have potential, and you get rid of things that aren't working, right? And there was no data. We literally had no performance data. Let me take that back. We had some engagement data, but we didn't have performance data at all on the other three things. And so I did get a lot of, like, well, we got to keep doing this event. We had a very large events budget. We got to keep doing this event because people like it. And, I'd say, well, how do you know? Somebody told me at the last one. I would say, okay, well, so did you generate sort of quantitative feedback? Like, do you have enough and specific enough sort of opinion or feedback to understand if this activity met its objectives? Which then got us to the place art, which is, what are the objectives? So if you don't have data to measure if your objectives were met, the obvious question becomes, do you have a sound objective that everyone stands behind? And the answer to that, in many cases, and this is not unique to this company, it happens a lot, the answer was, we don't really know, or five people at the company engaged in this all think that the objective is different. So I do think that data is critical. I do think that every marketing activity can and should be measured for success. But I believe that starts at objective setting, right? So you can't know if something worked if you don't know what it was supposed to do, or if 10 people have different ideas about what it was supposed to do. So although I'm a very data focused and data driven marketer, for me, it always starts with purpose and objective and intentionality. Then before we execute anything, we say, okay, if the objective of this is to generate 50 leads in a month, great. How are we going to know that we did that? So what specifically are we going to measure? What data do we have access to, and how are we going to report out on that? If we don't have data to do it, I often tell people it's like it doesn't exist. This thing you did, it's like it doesn't exist. If you can't show efficacy, don't bother doing it. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to do stuff where the data doesn't bear out whatever the success metric was that you were using. But that's how you learn. You have to have sort of data and understanding and metric evaluation to know if what you're doing makes sense. So I consider myself the least sexy marketer in the whole world because I am so data driven and focused, which probably is from my research background.
Yeah, I think what I hear you say, which really resonates, is that, and I've encountered this too, that some people are not clear on the objective of what you're trying to do, and different people have different ideas of what that objective is. And your superpower may be coming in and teasing out that objective, and then aligning all the people in the organization and the data that is needed to support it to meet that objective in a way that is trackable and measurable.
Yeah,
That's really important.
in an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if we could execute it in an automated way too? I mean, that's like that'd be great. That doesn't happen so often, but that's great.
I
And
know.
and I see that at all levels of marketing actually. So if you think about sort of over holistically marketing objectives and then the strategy to get there. And then you think about sort of okay, who are the target audiences or the personas that we're going to focus on to execute this strategy, and then what campaigns are we going to execute, and then what will be the assets or the elements in each of those campaigns. It's the same thought process applies, right? For at each one of those layers, what is the objective? So if a company's largest priority is, let's say, customer cross-seller, deepening the relationship with a customer, then that has to be marketing's primary objective. And then everything that follows down that sort of chain of marketing activity should be in service to that. So, right, if I'm trying to increase customer retention and cross sell, let's say, I'm not so focused on generating new customers. Okay, then maybe I'm not so focused on awareness activities, but instead I'm focused on nurture and cross sell activities and pipeline activities. So, what does that mean? That means I need to find ways to stay in front of and add more value to folks who already do business with us. And ideally, I need to find a way to do that that is as personalized as possible given the data and the MarTech stack we have, whatever company has. So it changes. Marketing is in service of the organization, whatever the organization needs to achieve. And to me, it always should be executed in that way.
Yeah, I think that keeping alignment with the executive leadership team and what those business objectives are, kind of touching base with that regularly can really help the marketing performance stay focused and ultimately do a better job for the organization. Let's finalize with one question. If you have the next 12 to 18 months that you're looking at for the projects and organization that you're working with right now, uh, what direction are you going to take things in? Looking at data, objectives, really lining that up. Is AI factoring into your future plans? I mean, tell me kind of where you're going.
Yeah, I'm gonna I don't know. Let me answer that in a couple ways, if that's okay. First, I would say that I think I believe AI in marketing is such a fascinating topic, and sometimes I do little social media posts about this when I'm kind of thinking about it from a sociocultural perspective, right? When I'm thinking about like, what are these big trends, and how are people in marketing reacting to them, and what is the interface between like these ideas that are out there in our popular culture in our world and how someone executes what a person does in his or her job. And I have said this before, and I probably will say it for a while yet, and that is that I think that we read a lot about personalization and hyper personalization in marketing using AI, right? So things like targeted email campaigns that are like super targeted, like one to one, that are targeting a person, um, things like that. And I think that there's a false sort of realism, or something that's not so realistic yet, kind of inherent in this talk of what AI can do for us, particularly in 2025. I think that for the vast majority of companies, we are not really that near to execution on those types of complex uses of AIs that we can see immediate ROI or customer acquisition with. So, um, there was a lot of talk last year in particular. There was a lot of talk about AI and the sort of ability, its supposed ability to transform marketing and customer relationship management and growth, customer growth, company growth. And people tended to talk about AI for this real-time digital interaction, this customer automation, this hyper-personalization. And the people who talked about that, the experts, to me, presented these ideas as if they were immediately doable, as if most marketing organizations could sort of hop on the AI bandwagon and immediately experience these tangible leaps in revenue. I don't, as I said, I don't think that's very realistic. And in fact, I talk to people already now in 2025 who are already saying, like, AI has disappointed me. I'm going to reduce my planned marketing spend for AI. And I'll say, why? Why has it disappointed you? Well, because there's no ROI. And then I'll say, well, how are you measuring that? How do you know? What have you done with AI? And the two things, people typically don't know what they're measuring. But the second thing is they've allocated budget money to AI, but not really done much with it. So I actually think that this is not the case in every company, but I have worked in a lot of organizations of vastly different sizes and focuses and execution speed and all that. And I think really AI tools haven't catalyzed explosive growth really in customer acquisition or revenue yet. And I think that the reason for that kind of goes back to customer experience and data architecture, right? So for many companies, we don't really know all the areas and places and locations and times in which our customers are interacting with us, right? Some of it's human, some of it's digital, but either way, we don't typically have eyes and data on all those things. And if we do, it's typically not integrated, right? So if we don't have the data, we actually don't understand the outcomes of a lot of these interactions, even if we can pinpoint the interactions. So we can't really personalize or automate anything, much less provide successful digital personalized interactions, because we, one, don't know all the times we touch a prospect or a customer, and two, we don't know which ones work and which ones don't work. So you can only sort of personalize something if you know if you know the hotspots, if you know what people are going to react to, if you know how they'll react, or you can predict it in a way that takes a lot of aggregated data to figure out. So I think the first step is, again, wow, I find myself saying this a lot. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. The first step in order to use AI effectively in that way is to really understand, strategize, and map out your customer experience, what you want that experience to be. What is an ideal experience over time, cradle to grave, the lifetime of that customer, even before they become a customer, pre-customer. What is the experience you want them to have? Is that experience captured in a data system today, both the experience happening and its outcome? Who is responsible for the data? Is the data correct? Does it have integrity? Is it managed appropriately or at all? And does it integrate with other systems, right? So that, to me, is step one. Now, recently at Roundstone, I did this very same thing. And one of the biggest takeaways for me is, I started that project. I was the CMO, so I was an executive leader, and I started that project because, as I said earlier, I couldn't tell. I had no way of knowing what existing marketing activity was working and not working. So when I stepped back to say, okay, let's figure out the data and the data systems, I realized that I couldn't just do that in relation to marketing activity on its own, right? In order to understand the long-term and sometimes not direct impact of marketing activities, I had to understand what was happening with the customer experience through the whole life cycle. And in the case of this company, that involved activity with marketing, sales, onboarding, relationship management, underwriting, um, that so many lessons learned. One was not one department had the same understanding of another department as to what the customer experience actually was. In a small but hyper growth company, two, we
Hmm.
didn't have data on 80% of those activities. We didn't record them anywhere. We had customer relationship management as a whole department, a group of people who didn't use a CRM. We had Salesforce. Customer relationship management didn't use it, and neither did sales. We used the pipeline or the opportunity functionality in Salesforce to underwrite insurance policies. Didn't capture at all sales pipeline activity or relationship management. And that might be sort of an extreme example of data and systems that needed to be rethought before we could engage in outbound AI. But I don't think it's as uncommon as people might think it is. All
No.
right, so in that case, right, the first thing you do is strategize a mapped customer experience. Then you align the data to it. Then you figure out what data do you have, what data do you need, what systems integrate, what systems need to be changed, what systems need to be introduced, and what needs to go away. And that again becomes kind of an unsexy, very tight partnership with IT, right? Now, in the meantime, I have this other sort of thing that I do and I think about a lot, and that is I think that AI today is incredibly valuable for most marketers, but in a different way. To me, AI today can be used for content creation and editing in a very sort of immediate and efficient way. And it's not to say we're not going to get to that sort of big picture, higher level automation and personalization, because we will. We got to deal with our data and our systems in order to do that. We'll get there. But right now, we can ask ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever engine you use, to write us a blog post. And it'll happen in, let me tell you, approximately 36 minutes as opposed to 4 hours because I did this. I still do this at times, but when I was rebuilding the marketing organization at Roundstone, there was a moment where I had very few staff, and so I was the CMO. But I found myself doing the social media posts, writing the blog articles, like doing the asset generation and creation, and I didn't have time to sort of think of a blog article topic, outline it, write it, edit it myself. So that process takes about 4 hours, give or take. So in my case, I used ChatGPT, and it, on average, took 36 minutes. That's a big deal. And that is asking ChatGPT to write me something from scratch. And there are some interactions, right? ChatGPT, make this, um, add more insurance-based jargon, take out insurance-based jargon, make this more sophisticated in tone. Um, Add more on this topic, include this person's perspective, all the ways that you can take a generative AI machine and specify and enhance what you want out of it. But still, like 36 minutes versus 4 hours. A social media post in 5 minutes because it writes you something, you do a little tweaking, you're off to the races. These are real gains to me. This is transformative. It's just transformative in terms of efficiency, capacity, and operations. But those are big deals in marketing, and especially as I mean, I think many people would agree that when a company has sort of financial uncertainty, marketing is one of the first budgets to be looked at, right? So you do less with more. Often you're in a position where you do less with more. Like this is a huge tool for marketers to do less with more today. And to me, I
More with
think
less.
more with that. Yeah, yeah, more with less. And and that's really quantifiable, right? It's quantifiable not in terms of ROI or revenue generation, but it's quantifiable in terms of capacity. So if I'm getting paid, X amount of dollars an hour and my all-in cost is Y, whatever it is, how much money have I saved by the company by using 36 of my minutes instead of 4 hours? I mean, that's tangible gain that can be tracked and recognized and reported on. I just think we want so badly right now for AI to work in ways that have kind of been promised to us and made us very excited. But maybe we're not there yet, but we are here. And again, although not sexy, efficiency and capacity are big deals.
They are. What I think is not sexy, but I feel like you're the marketing realist or the AI
Ah,
realist.
maybe, I don't know.
So maybe a lot of people right now are AI optimists or maybe overestimating or really getting stuck on the promises of AI.
Mm-hmm.
But your background and your experience gives you such a grounded look at AI, and
Thanks.
you do bring a realistic viewpoint to that. What can we really do with it right
Yeah.
now? How is it really serving the organization right now? And then again, tying that back to the objectives of the business and making sure that that's never lost sight of. And I
Yeah.
think that's really valuable, and it's a really unique approach. So
Thanks.
that covers our questions today. Amy, it has been wonderful speaking with you. I really appreciate your time and the sharing that you're doing for all the marketing executives and technologists out there trying to muddle their way through all of this as we go day to day.